One of the keys to healing from abuse, and I say this time and time and time again, especially as a mom, is to understand how your brain works. You need to understand why your brain does what it does, why you want to go back, why you stayed so long to begin with, why it feels so uncomfortable to not be with the abusive person, why it's so uncomfortable to connect with people, even in non-romantic ways. This stuff is so important because it's really easy for us to continue to beat up on ourselves if we don't know why our brain does what it does. And the more we don't understand our brain, the worse things are going to become. Because what we don't realize is that when you're in an abusive relationship, your brain genuinely changes. The impact changes, just like how you will get a scar on your arm. If you get a massive cut, it will heal, but there's a scar. Your brain is the same way. And learning why that happens and how this impacts you is really important. As a mom, it is equally important to understand our children's brains. And the reason why I harp on this so hard is because my relationship with my child did not get better until I understood how his brain worked. And that was something that I already had a basic understanding of, because I went to school to be an elementary or middle school teacher. I, did the child psychology stuff. The moment I got pregnant, I was like, I want to learn everything. I love learning. So I was like, all right, I want to learn everything about my baby. I want to learn about everything. I want to learn how his body's forming. I want to learn how his brain's forming. But even with all of that understanding, our relationship could not progress to where it is now, and it cannot continue to progress until I learned and continue to learn why he does what he does and how his brain works and how things that he's gone through has impacted him and how my own trauma has impacted his brain. And the reason why I harp so hard on this is because, one, it is really easy for us to beat up on ourselves when we don't understand why our brain does what it does. Because we are sitting here healing, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, sometimes financially or spiritually from the abuse that we went through. And yet there is still a part of us, a bigger part that we want to admit, that wants to go back. That's justifying what happened. That's coming up with all these ways how we were the problem. And if we don't understand why our brain's doing what it's doing, it's really easy for us to lean into that part of the brain and go, oh my God, I probably was overreacting. Oh my God, I did ask for it. If I woulda, coulda, shoulda, all of this, we're going to fall into that trap. Learning how your brain works, I'm not saying it makes it easy or fixes it, but it gives us the ability to have a buffer between those things to go, okay, I know my brain is going to miss the abuser, but I also understand that my brain is healing from trauma. It's dealing with addiction. It's dealing with all of those experiences. It's dealing with PTSD, right? You have that buffer that makes it easier to resist your brain when it's pulling stuff like that, when it's doing stuff like that. And the reason why I really want you to understand your children's brains is because, one, as moms, I really, really think that we all need to understand a basic child psychology. I'm not saying that everyone needs to go into the deep depths of neurochemistry and neurobiology and things like that, but I do think that we need to understand why our children do what they do. Because if we live with the understanding, if we continue to parent without understanding our children's brains, we are going to think, one, that they are capable of behaviors that they're not. We are going to think, two, that they are trying to maliciously hurt us when they're just trying to survive. Also, as moms who have experienced abuse, it will become far too easy to get even more triggered by our children's behavior because our brain will jump immediately into fight, flight, or fawn. Because our brain's going to perceive that behavior as a threat, so it's going to treat it that way. Because your brain does not understand that your child is not an abuser. Your brain does not understand that your child is developmentally learning how to not lie, how to not gaslight, how to build independence. Your brain just sees a threat, and the last time you were threatened like that, your safety was compromised. You got hurt. Maybe you're lucky to be alive, right? Learning your child's brain is not going to fix everything and magically make motherhood easy. There is not a day that goes by. I wish there was a way to make motherhood easy. But what this does is, again, it provides a buffer, but it also gives our brain a logical explanation for why our child with an underdeveloped brain is exhibiting certain behaviors that we experienced in the abusive relationship. Because abuse is emotional immaturity. It makes sense for a child to throw a temper tantrum And sometimes it's even developmentally appropriate and it makes sense. Not saying it's okay. Developmentally appropriate is not making excuses for the behavior. But it will make sense even for our children to lash out and even try to hit us because they're trying to learn. But it does not make developmental sense. It's not developmentally appropriate for a grown adult to be exhibiting those behaviors, to be throwing temper tantrums, to be threatening, to be hurting us, to be manipulative, right? And so when we understand these things, it is so much easier for us to move forward. So with all of that being said, I wanted to share with you guys some resources that have really helped me in my journey to healing, in my journey of healing my relationship with my child, of healing my relationship with myself, of learning how to connect with other people, how to heal financially, spiritually, physically, emotionally, right? And these are the things that genuinely changed my life 100%. And before I share them, I do want to say that there is not a single book or 500 books you could read or YouTube channels to subscribe to or courses to buy or podcasts to listen to that will help you at all if you do not implement. So if you're listening to this podcast and you are desperately looking for resources, but you haven't implemented anything that I've taught you over the last 200 plus episodes, then you need to stop looking for more resources and start implementing what you've been learning. Because knowledge is great, but knowledge is useless without implementation. I can do all the work to learn how to build a house. I can have all of the knowledge, but that's going to be completely useless to me if I don't sit down and build the damn house. Knowledge is not going to build the house. Knowledge of running a marathon is not going to build me the body I need in order to run a marathon. If I spend 6 months reading about marathons, learning optimal nutrition, and learning about anatomy, and the best gaits, and the best way to run, and learning about pacing, and learning about the best workouts, and learning about how Olympians train, if I learn for 6 months, and I show up to the race, I'm going to be dead by mile 2. Because I haven't implemented, I haven't trained, all I did was learn. So you have to implement. So I say that, one, implement what you've been learning here, but also these books, they are action books. You're going to learn things. And yes, I want you to have light bulb moments. Just like here on the show, I want you to have light bulb moments. I want you to have these mindset shifts that make you see life differently, even if it's just a little shift. But there comes a time where you need to take action. And the resources, the books, the podcasts I'm going to be sharing with you today are going to be those things that you need to take in the information and implement as you go. All of these resources are going to be available. There's a link in the description, in the show notes, karleighlynn.com/favorites. All of these are listed there. So number 1 is The Whole Brain Child. I love this book. I love this book so much. It literally tells you in a way that isn't overwhelming how your child's brain works. So it basically gives you a crash course not only in just basic child psychology, but literally what's happening in the brain. I love the way this book is broken down because it's very digestible and it's super understandable. This is one that I think, like, every time a baby's born, every midwife or doula or a birth partner or OBGYN, like whatever it is, they need to hand you this book. Be like, all right, like, here you go, read this. We don't have a manual, but this is pretty freaking close. So The Whole Brain Child by Daniel J. Siegel, MD, and Tina Payne Bryson, PhD. So good. Number 2 is Scream-Free Parenting. I love this one. I gravitated towards this book because I wanted to stop screaming so much. I grew up in a house where everybody yelled a lot, and I took on that trait and I yell way too much. I hate how often I yell. I hate how much I yell. And I was like, okay, Scream-Free Parenting, this is going to teach me how not to yell. This is going to give me skills to do instead. This is going to help me process through it. But what I love is that, yes, it's definitely geared towards those parents like me who want to learn how to stop screaming. But also what he decides, or what the author Hal Runkle, LMFT, describes as a scream-free parent are breaking those very harsh and unhelpful parenting cycles, like yelling. But also, if we close off and we don't supply our kid with affection, if we get easily upset and we're triggered and we run off, we don't have, emotional maturity, we don't have the skills, So even if you're not a screamer, I really recommend this book. This book was so well written, and it was not written in a way that's going to make you feel guilty. This book is written in a way that makes you feel empowered and strong. There's no guilt in it. The doctor, or the LMFT, excuse me, that wrote this book, he was also a screamer. And so I struggle to read books like this sometimes because I do feel incredible amounts of guilt. But this book breaks it down so kindly and so openly without making you feel like you failed as a parent. So yeah, Scream Free Parenting by Hal Runkle. And thirdly, No Drama Discipline. This is written by the same authors of The Whole Brain Child, Daniel J. Siegel, MD, and Tina Payne Bryson, PhD. It takes the Whole Brain Child approach. Even if you haven't read The Whole Brain Child, you're gonna get a ton out of No Drama Discipline. This teaches you how to discipline your child without causing trauma. And this is, or without causing the amount of trauma that maybe we have experienced. It's very much a cycle breaker book. And I'm all about that cycle breaker energy. I've literally got a course called Cycle Breaker. And this book teaches you how to discipline and raise up your kids and guide them without doing those things that we experienced as children in the abusive relationship. We as moms, we feel incredible amounts of guilt all the time. We're always doing too much and not enough simultaneously. And after we've experienced abuse, we have our triggered responses where we lash out and we behave in ways that we're not proud of, and then we beat ourselves up for it. It's like, oh, well, dang, right? I'm just terrible anyway. And No Drama Discipline teaches you how to show up for your kids and how to build up your respect with your children so you can have those no drama discipline, so you can have the no drama discipline life that you desperately desire. These next two books are about us and our brain and our healing journey. So the very first book that I recommend is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, MD. This book is powerful, but let me tell you, huge trigger warning, this book gets into it. Like within 2 pages, I was bawling because they go deep on what trauma does to the brain. And van der Kolk does not mince words. He is not afraid to say what happened and what led to this person acting out in certain ways and what happened to their brain and why they did certain things and why they reacted certain ways. And it's very, very difficult to read, but it is incredibly powerful. It has taken me over 1.5 years. I think I'm going on 2 years of reading this book now because it's very heavy. But I've learned so much. It taught me so much about me and my experiences and made me feel so much less alone. Because when I read my experience in a book, I'm like, oh my God, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy, because if this person's going through it too, if they're noticing this in multiple people, maybe it really wasn't my fault. Maybe it really is a problem that I didn't ask for, that I didn't cause. If you are in the mental place to do so, if you feel like you are able to handle a book like that, even if you only go through like a chapter a month, you're gonna get a lot out of it, and I really recommend it. The second book that I recommend for mamas in healing is Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. This book is so good. It definitely is something that I need to go back and reread. This book is geared, like it's written in the vocabulary and the verbiage of someone growing up in an alcoholic family. Whether you are an adult child of an alcoholic, or you are a recovering alcoholic, or you are in a relationship with, or you have a family member who's an alcoholic. But don't let those words sway you, because this book, I didn't read it for a long time. My friend told me to get it for years until I finally got it, and then it sat on my bookshelf for probably 1.5 years before I actually read it, because I was like, oh, well, I read the word alcoholic and I was like, okay, well, that's not me, that's not my family, that doesn't impact me, that's not something that, yeah. I definitely should have read it earlier. This is a book I wish I would have had in high school. I will be honest, it's hard to read because it forces you to take personal responsibility for your own healing and for your own behaviors. Not in a way that is victim blaming, but just in a way that is very, very honest and very open. It also helps to understand through the lens of an addict and alcoholic, because you're realizing oh my gosh, I am exhibiting these behaviors, and they weren't even an alcoholic, or I don't even use, but I can relate to some of these feelings. And I talk about a lot about how abuse changes your brain, and we develop trauma bonds with our abuser, and we become addicted to our abuser. Our brains become addicted to our abuser because of the highs and the lows that we've experienced. And this book really shines a light on how real that is. And it's something that I didn't really take seriously until I read this book. Even though, like, I already had the knowledge, but I didn't understand until I was like, oh my gosh, like, my brain is literally acting as if I was an addict, as if I went through these things. You need to, again, learn and implement as you go. But these two books, The Body Keeps the Score and Codependent No More, these are such great books. Because The Body Keeps the Score is all about how your body stores trauma and holds on to what happened. And even if you don't have complete memories that you are cognizant of, your body does. And it's, again, very freeing, very validating. Codependent No More really dives into the psychology of it and talks about how we can break free of that and really step out of these harmful patterns so we don't repeat them in the future. And lastly, if you're listening to this, you're already a podcast listener, and I wanted to share with you 3 other podcasts that I think will really benefit you. I love podcasts. I listen to podcasts, multiple of them every day, and these are the top 3 that I recommend to every single mama that I know, especially my mamas in healing. So the very first one that I recommend is The Virtual Couch by Tony Overbay. I love this one, but I'm going to be completely honest. I avoided listening to any podcasts with male hosts for a very long time, especially when it came to psychology, because I do have such a struggle when it comes to my relationships with men. And so I want to be open and vulnerable with that, because if you can relate to that, Tony does such a great job of sharing what he knows and being honest and open about things and giving you knowledge without making you feel belittled or judged or anything like that, like for not knowing enough. And the podcast does a really great job of diving into these topics and making you feel seen, making you feel heard. So go check out The Virtual Couch by Tony Overbay. Again, these links also are at the bottom of the favorites page, KARLEIGH.com/favorites. Second one, this is for my mamas. I love this one so much. I love Kendra. It is the Mother Like a Boss podcast by Kendra Hennessy. I have never seen anyone else talk about motherhood in a way that Kendra does. She is such a powerful, strong woman and such a powerful, strong mom. And she teaches you and coaches you through some of these things about homemaking, about dealing, with kids and all of these parts of being a mom that no one really talks about. And she teaches you how to mother like a boss, how to take care of your home, whether that is delegating it to a partner or whether that is delegating it to your kids. These things that we as moms think about. She does such a great job of talking about it without being like, oh my gosh, it's the woman's job to do everything. Because if you want to be that mom, that's more power to you. Kendra says it all the time. If that's the mom you want to be, that's fine. But not all of us want to have the stereotypical mother role in our households. And she talks about all of this and so much more. And she's so open and she's so honest, and I'm just so grateful for her. So the Mother Like a Boss podcast, go listen to it. I guarantee you, test me on this. Go listen to one of her podcast episodes and then come back and tell me it didn't change your life. I'm telling you, I love her to death. The last thing I want to share today is Your Parenting Long Game with Rachel Bailey. Her focus is helping families with kids with big emotions, which definitely fits my family. I've got my big emotions. Like, I'm gonna be honest, I'm listening to this podcast and it's really helped on my own reparenting journey because I feel so heard and so seen. I'm like, oh, that's why I felt that way. Or, oh, maybe that's how I feel that way now. Or, oh my gosh, I can actually relate to my child because I'm understanding my own experience better now. But also, she again talks about scenarios and situations and parenting strategies in a way that's not judgmental. It's just open. She's open and she's honest, but she also isn't here to tell you that you're doing a bad job as a mom and you're failing. She's just there to help and support in any way that she can. She's a child psychologist, I believe. She used to work as a therapist for like teenagers, and she just does such a great job. And the episodes are less than 15 minutes each usually, so they're very digestible. There's no fluff. It's straight to the point. I learn so much. These 3 shows are so powerful. None of them are specifically about healing, but they are all so powerful. Like Virtual Couch is not about motherhood, but it's going to teach you a lot about why you do what you do. It's going to teach you a lot about psychology, and you're probably going to learn so much about yourself that you're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I can't believe all of this makes sense. So all of these resources I've talked about today, the 3 books I talked about for kids psychology, the 2 books I talked about for us learning about our bodies and our own codependent behaviors, as well as the podcast, are all listed, if I could talk, at KARLEIGH.com/favorites. You can find that down in the show description or in the podcast show notes, whichever way you're consuming the content. And I really hope that this brought you some resources that are able to help you on your own healing journey.